Welcome to the Guider Talks. Absolutely delighted today to have with me Mike Lander from Piscari. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, Mike, tell us, what are you known for? What do people know you for?
So I work with agencies around helping them negotiate better deals with their clients, especially when they meet these horrible people called procurement.
Procurement. You said the word already. I thought that we were doing...
I couldn't resist.
We were doing so well, and then you mentioned procurement. They are the devil's spawn. I hope there's no procurement people listening, and none of the procurement people that I'm seeing in the next few months. But, okay, so procurement. So let's just go straight into it. So what's the backstory with you ending up discussing procurement? Where does that come from? Tell us how you end up talking to us, a community of digital agency owners, about procurement.
So a very, very brief kind of backstory on me, long-term consultant. So I was trained by the likes of McKinsey, KPMG, PwC as a management consultant back in the day. Then borrowed, back in the day when you could, borrowed about £3.5 million from Bank of Scotland to buy a consultancy company. With a bit of my own money, and then grew that consultancy company up. And so kind of entrepreneurial journey started around about kind of like 2000. And what happened was, along that kind of journey, I ended up starting a procurement consultancy with a friend of mine. And the proposition was very simple. We would work with companies as an outsourced procurement function. So we would act as their procurement people, and we go out and we buy goods and services for them. And they were often private equity backed. So bigger companies that had a reasonable cost base, and our job was to go in and improve the bottom line. And a very simple thing, the reason that we targeted private equity as these procurement people was when we went in, if we could generate £1 million of cost savings for a company, it would generate 10 to 15 million pound of value for the investor because they sell for X times EBITDA.
Yeah, got it.
So it's a very simple kind of value proposition. And we started doing that. So scenarios, we were the buyers. We'd go into a company and we would act as the buyers. And of course, a lot of spend is in marketing. So I spent many years being a buyer, a procurement director, buying goods and services, particularly around marketing agencies. So I'm the person you'd meet, Robert, when we're doing a deal. And what I learned was that I've got a certain style. I'm a very rational person, numerate. I'm a trained negotiator. And I got pretty good at negotiating deals with agencies and all sorts of other providers as well. And that went on for many, many years. And then I ended up selling that business. And what I do now is I've got a portfolio. So I do a number of things in my life. But the prime thing that I spend 4.5 days of my week doing is I now work with agencies to unlock the kind of the backstage pass to how do procurement work, what do they want, and how do you negotiate with them? Because negotiation is a trained skill far more than it is a intuitive art. And that's how I got into it.
Okay. So there will be people watching, listening, who have never encountered procurement because they've worked with the local business community or local businesses, and the idea of procurement and master service level agreements and kind of all that stuff hasn't happened because they've gone to work with, I don't know, a factory that's got 100 people, and they talk to the boss or the head of marketing, the deal's done,
Exactly.
shake hands, job's done. So for those who are truly green about procurement, is everything I say about procurement people true?
So two things. When do you meet procurement people? So it's a really great entree into that, which is if you looked at, and this is a bit of a proxy, so it's a kind of a bit of a broad brush, but when a company gets to about probably 50 million plus 100 million of turnover, yeah? So when they're 100 million of turnover, the cost base is reasonably big. So between the kind of the direct goods and services, things that affect delivery, and the indirect stuff, all the overhead stuff, there's probably third-party costs of, I don't know, pick a number, £6-7 million. Well, if you get 10% saving on that, that's quite a lot of money. So you tend to meet people like me when companies get above 50 million turnover, number one. Number two, is everything you say about procurement true, Robert? Well, I don't know everything that you say. However, from the conversations we've had, I think procurement's moved a long way from where it was. There are far more evolved procurement buyers now than there were 10 years ago. And I see that trend definitely improving. That procurement used to be, it's just about savings, bang the table, pretty adversarial negotiation, very unpleasant conversations. And it was kind of, you do the deal my way or we don't do a deal at all. Now, I would say much more. Value's talked about a lot more. There's quite a lot of stuff and nonsense talked about value. But procurement are starting to think more about how do you compare agencies? So you'll have been through this yourself, Robert. The RFP turns up on your desk. So you've been asked to bid for something. And the RFP's got all sorts of stuff in it about scope and about objectives and all sorts of stuff. And then they'll also say, by the way, there's a rate card we'd like to fill in. Could you just fill it in for us? Don't change it, whatever you do. Just fill it in. And the agencies reluctantly comply. And it's normally what kind of role, what kind of grade, what's the hourly rate, how many hours are you going to be spending on this? Well, of course, what procurement are doing is they're trying to compare apples with apples. And the realization that marketing procurement are coming to, which has taken some time, I would say, is how on earth are you going to compare marketing agencies delivering creative campaigns that deliver sales uplift you're going to compare them on an hourly rate basis. So you're going to buy on activity, but you're trying to deliver outcomes and outputs. It's bonkers. But the human mind gets trapped into this. If you give me a spreadsheet and I'm a rationalist, and you allow me to compare, I'll compare. So a simple tip for some of your watchers and listeners is, this is a hard thing to do, but I would say personally, if you don't send that rate card analyze or that rate card back, you're probably going to get kicked out of the process. So you have to take a view. I'd recommend, don't send the spreadsheet back, whatever you do. Take a PDF of the absolute minimum that you can by hiding columns and rows and give them a rate card. Because another tip is, in procurement, we have to have a rate card for all service providers. Because our bosses say, well, what's the day rate? In case we need to do some marginal work, which requires a bit of day rate activity. So we have to have some kind of day rate. And it's behavioural. It's that people have got so used to day rates. I mean, it's such a bad way of buying anything. But it's a mindset.
It's a bad way of selling anything, never mind buying.
Bad way of selling. It's a bad way of buying. It's just bad. I'm reading a very good book by an academic on the kind of the tyranny of hourly-based pricing. And it's just a bad model. But you need to provide it, or else they're going to go, well, you don't comply, so you're out. But the thing to do,
to be fair, I mean, when you or I buy anything, whether it be someone to paint the windows at home, or a gardener, or anything, you're grappling all the time for. I just want to get a sense of whether this is £15 or £20 an hour. I just want to get a sense of, oh, you're a consultant. I just want to get a sense of whether it's £1,500 or £3,000 a day. So,
yeah.
and part of that is so that I know whether I'm dealing with a BMW or a Vauxhall. And,
yes.
And part of it's kind of so that we don't waste any time. You know, in other words, if my budget is only £10,000 and you turn out to be a £6,000 a day consultant, well, you're the wrong person, which is fine. I mean, I'd rather have that conversation now than later.
Exactly right.
So there is, I mean, there is a big default of of day rates, and you know there's a in America they call it this hardball selling thing, which is you just go straight in and say, what, tell me what your day rate.
Yeah.
My day rate's £12,000 a day. Whoa, that's too big for me. Excellent, fine, because now I can go and find someone who doesn't want to pay £12,000 a day, and I think
Because they're going to see £120,000 of value off the back of it. Yeah.
absolutely, cool. So anyhow, back to where you were. Sorry to interrupt. It's just
So what happens is that the skill is give procurement what they need, which is some kind of rate card, but price your job obviously around this is a fixed price job. We understand your outcomes that you're aiming for, or your outputs that you want us to deliver, and we know we can hit and exceed your expectations within this fixed price envelope. We will not be reporting how many hours each person's worked on for that job. It's a fixed price piece of work.
But that's the mindset of the builder, isn't it? That you win the job and then you make the money on the variances. You know?
So
you didn't mention you wanted a front door to the house.
exactly. You wanted windows, really? So this is another great topic around variation management, agencies and variation management, and over-servicing. What happens, and I would say in 95% of agencies that I've talked to, but I talk to a lot of agencies, there's quite a few in the 5%, like you do, 95% do not do variation control. So what happens is they sell a fixed price job. And you're right, ideally, every bit of work outside of the defined scope in the SOW, in the contract, you would charge a variable rate for. You've asked for something extra, another campaign. Well, a campaign price is £8,000, so we're going to invoice you for £8,000. What happens is the marketing person says, that was a great campaign we did. Could you do it in Italian for us? And the agency goes, whoa, well, we have got an Italian speaker and we might be able to do it. And I say, oh, that's great. Thanks. Do it as a favour for me. I'll make sure you're okay later on. They do the work. No invoice goes in. No one's charged. Marketing person changes. New person turns up and says, I see that you've done all this work and you do lots of foreign languages free of charge. So what I'd like now is Spanish, German, and Austrian, please. And the poor account manager sat there going, oh my God, what have I done? So variation control is very important because it educates the client about there's an audit trail, we're happy to do the work, delighted to do the work, but it's not free. And then you get the opportunity to say, this one we'll do free of charge. The variation order goes in at a price of zero.
Yeah. I mean, the story. I was with an agency recently, and actually, it wasn't recently. Now I think about it, because it's when you could travel around. So it's basically a year ago. It feels recently, and they were sending once a month. They were sending 5 people to a meeting to report.
Wow.
So not only do you just want to think about what the 5 people.
Absolutely.
Director of senior and person, but because they're a good agency, they always arrived an hour early because they're good at their meetings. So you had five half days in order to and petrol and lunch and maybe meat for breakfast in order to deliver a half-hour meeting that they're perfectly capable of delivering by Zoom. And it's not and that wasn't in the original brief. Okay, the original brief was and occasional check-ins and meetings and a quarterly review. And then they felt it would be nice to meet. And then they said, we'll come back in a month's time to make sure everything's happy. And before they knew where they were, they'd added 5 half days per month. Just into the bill. And, you know, and you just see that. You see that happening. Eager to please. Eager to keep.
Eager to please.
And that.
And I go back, I mean, I'm quite old, Robert, so, you know, I'm 56 now. So if I go back to the days of Tom Peters, when he was talking about, you know, total quality management and, you know, delighting your clients and the client's always right and exceeding expectations, I think one of the problems is that we've taken that a bit too far, is that we now go massively overboard over servicing our clients when actually the core of what they need, very good point, reporting is, well, if we had an online tool that you can log into and you can see what the dashboard looks like live, and then we'll give you a QBR for an hour on Zoom every quarter with the relevant people, most clients would go, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see post COVID how there'll be this
It will.
pushback to meetings, because on the one, I can think of nothing nicer than buying you a beer and having something to eat and putting the world right, as opposed to this transactional thing we have on the
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just finish my beef with procurement, okay? Because
It won't finish, Robert. It won't finish.
you're right,
It won't finish.
But I have met several people who I would challenge whether they actually had hearts or souls. I remember one particular event on a £6 million piece of work, where the guy said, "That's fine. I've just got two conditions. I think it was two conditions. And the first one was that they paid 18 months after delivery. So I said, well, that's not going to happen.
Wow.
Nice try. And I said, what's the second condition? He said, the second condition is that we have 33% off every single price. And I just picked up my stuff, closed it, and walked out of the room.
Quite right.
And it's like the naivety, not the naivety, the chutzpah is the Yiddish word, the cheek, the nerve of believing that I had that much margin that I could take a 33% pay cut. One. Secondly, back to rate cards, you shoot video, it costs a certain amount of money, plus or minus 10%. So we knew that everything was on board. And what that guy had done is he'd killed the relationship I had with his colleague, and to the detriment of the deal, because, as I said to them, every 5 minutes you don't come back to me with an answer, you're losing me working until midnight making this stuff happen. So I totally get that procurement are there in order to get the best price. I've got no problem with that. I totally get that Mr. Procurement is on 5% or 10% of anything he saves over and above whatever the number is.
Yeah.
But it's the accountant gone mad in a way, the accountant mentality gone bonkers, because you're not going to get the best deal for your client, for the company that you work for, if you screw people down too hard.
I mean, there's this, and I concur with that absolutely. There's this torched earth problem, is that you end up with the lowest cost denominator, all your suppliers making tiny margins, and who wants to own that torched earth? It's, you can't grow anything on that ground because all the value's been taken out of it. I think again, for your viewers, one thing to watch out for when you're researching clients and you're first looking at, everyone's got their top 50 list on their wall of clients they want to target. Just look at that top 50, go through each one, find out how they're funded. Those that are funded by private equity, VC, whatever you want to call it, be very cautious, possibly take them off your list. Because the great thing with PE companies is growth is essential. So if you're an agency and you're focused on sales growth, e-commerce business, you could be in a great position. The downside is that growth has to deliver very strong EBITDA. So you'll end up with a client where you can deliver them growth, but unfortunately, they're going to shave every last pound they can off your price, because that drops straight through to the bottom line.
But this kind of confirms, one of the things that I always get agencies saying, I want to work with bigger clients, I say, you don't want to work with bigger clients. Oh, but they've got deeper pockets and bigger campaigns. And I said, look, in your list of top of 50, fine, have some big agencies or big possible clients that are in your industry, in your space. But, alligators are not the same as small worms. They're entirely different, both as agencies are and as clients are. And firstly, the purchasing, to get that £6 million deal was 3 years in the making, firstly.
Absolutely.
It come to nothing. Secondly, the as already indicated, the cash flow implications of it were just crippling. Potentially, and even when we cut the deal, the original, in year one, the cash flow was still I think 160 days, and it was only in it was
Wow.
only in year two where I got them to pay me 3 months in advance, which was actually an even bigger
Yeah.
problem. It was an even bigger problem being paid 3 months in advance actually than being paid late, because
Yeah.
we just had so much cash slushing around. But the big organisation, you can't get traction. There's oodles of politics. There are rules and regulations for everything you can't do. Everything goes via the brand police, and they create rules and they slow everything down. And so you have your client in the business saying, "Hey, we want to do whatever it is, the Black Friday thing. We've got a 6 month lead-in time." And 6 months isn't enough lead-in time for the
All the sign off.
mothership to put it on.
That's right.
And it's not a lot of fun working with these large organisations. I mean, it can be. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It can be, because they go, yeah, we'll do this and we'll roll it out across 180 cities on Friday when I hit the button. That's awesome. That's awesome. But the downside is, so this whole thing about procurement is a really good reason, in a way, that some agencies may actually find it better to not listen to any more of this broadcast whatsoever. They're never going to go into that den, and they because the great thing about working with the director who is a director, or the owner
Yeah.
who is an owner, is it can be done on a handshake and an email. The general price is agreed, and so on and so forth, as opposed to having to submit your health and safety procedure and your race equality
Absolutely.
procedure.
Your disaster recovery processes.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I mean, there's a sweet spot, I think, Robert, which is 20 million turnover to 100 million turnover. They're great companies to work with. They don't tend to have procurement people involved. You do talk to the budget holder. You've got a direct route into a very senior person.
and you're
More creative.
you're saying that number is 20 to 50 million.
I think so. You could probably stretch it up to like maybe, 60, 70 million. But once you're over 100 million of turnover, there is someone's bound to be involved somewhere as a purchasing, procurement, buyer, something or other, bound to be.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I picked that sweet spot.
And
I do. My clients are 10 million to 100 million turnover. Those are my clients. Because I don't want to deal with procurement in big companies.
no, I totally get that. But but I have to say, there is, people who know my backstory know that there is still something really wonderful about big businesses. I will just push back.
Yeah.
I mean, Google last year, who are a client of mine, took me to 19. They took me to 19 countries last year. Yeah.
Wow.
And they put me in front of, on average, 500 people in each of those countries. So
Wow.
that's been a great journey. Barclays, for, was it 7 or 8 years, I did 46 gigs a year for Barclays in front of 150 people. It was like a tour. So you can get swept. You can get swept up. The training and coaching we've done with Google went UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Croatia, South Africa, Singapore. So you can get handed around. You can get handed around a big organisation.
That's right.
You need one big organisation. And when people look at me and they say, "What was your strategy?" It would appear it wasn't my strategy, but historically, we look back at it. I had a big sponsor who shared me round, for want of a better word. Now,
Yeah.
and we use we always talk about, wouldn't it be nice if BMW Luton took me? Yeah, but if BMW Luton will take you to sort out their website, it doesn't actually mean that you're going to be BMW Paris, Munich, and Rome.
That's right.
And as we know, every one of our competitors claims to have worked with Barclays and BMW, and
Yeah.
we know that they probably polished a sign or something to
Exactly.
happen. So
And I think, Rob, we've talked about this as well, about one of your big questions is about agency growth, is that, what are some of the key success factors in agency growth? And I think it's a simple question underneath an awful lot of complexity. And what we've just described then about big clients, multinationals versus that 10 million to kind of 80 million turnover client is none of it's right for every agency. It all depends. If you've got Google, well, the chances of getting Google and then going, I work for Google, well, maybe you'll work with Spotify and then you'll work with other big brands, because big brands have this feeling of warmth that you've worked with Google, you must be amazing. Bigger brands will work with you. But that doesn't mean that smaller agencies...
There's a big but with that, which is because we thought that when we got Barclays, and it was like, so when you then go to NatWest, you say, hello, we work with Barclays. And they go, oh, in that case, when you've finished working with Barclays,
exactly,
you can come and work to us. And also there's a hidden agenda with your big client. So you haven't done an exclusivity agreement.
Nope,
you're so happy that you've got the big boy, you fished and pulled them in and they're on. You're so happy, of course you haven't done an exclusivity agreement.
There's a big red flag here. Yeah,
okay. So then you say, oh, I just wanted to mention to you, I'm thinking of going and talking to NatWest about some of the work we've been doing. And they go, well, you can do that, but
you won't work with us ever again.
Coming off my Christmas list. You suddenly realise that, oh, okay, that's, and you. But nothing I'm sharing is there's no IP, there's nothing specific. Yeah, we understand that, but if you're going to work, you work.
So fascinating, Robert. So all clients want sector expertise. They want to know you understand retail financial services really, really well.
But
and yet, they don't want you working with other retail financial services clients. I mean, if they could hear themselves, it's pretty ludicrous.
Yeah, of course it is. But that's the art. That's the art of if you're very close to two people you're copying. If you take it from 10, you're an expert. And it's kind of just getting.
That's right.
So let's just stay with the procurement piece for a minute, because there's lots of stuff I'd like to talk about. What are the bear traps? So let's just say you've been. So I have an an RFP comes onto your desk. Personally, we have a score sheet for RFPs. We only respond to RFPs that I've written, to be blunt about it. But let's just say an RFP applies. Do you just accept it? How do you deal with it? What are the steps?
So if we take a step back so I'll answer the question in kind of two halves. Before the RFP gets to you...
Let's explain for those who don't know. RFP?
Request for proposal. Yeah, exactly. Before it gets to you, on the other side, on the buyer's side, what's happened is, to get to an RFP stage, most procurement people will have had to take that fairly seriously. It's quite a lot of work to build an RFP. Because on the bit that you don't see before it gets to you is, I've got to talk to all the internal stakeholders. I've got to confirm an outline budget. I've got to agree a scope of works. I've got to work out the targets. I've got to find out my list of who I'm going to send it to. So quite a lot of invested effort has gone in by procurement. So the first thing is, if you receive it, you've received it for a reason. Now then, that may be for the wrong reason. So when I send out the RFP, I typically send it out to between 5 and 7 agencies, typically. And what I'm doing is I need to shortlist, yeah? So I want to get a bit of a spread back from agencies to find out what the variation is. How will I have found? Let's say it's 6 agencies, Robert. How have I found 6 agencies? So the first agency, I work with them already. They're the incumbent. Second agency, we worked with them 3 years ago. We got rid of them, but let's try them again. I've now got 4 to pick from. The third agency, I've spoken to my colleague who's a procurement person in another sector, another company, who've used agencies, and they give me a reference. I'll use them. They're my third. I've now got 3 more. Well, Google's my best friend. So I look at thought leadership papers, and I look at all sorts of things, content, LinkedIn, have a search around, and I find 3 more agencies. Which 3 do you reckon get shortlisted? Well, let's not be surprised when the Google search ones don't actually get through. So your point about qualifications critical. Your score sheet, I would imagine one of the criteria on there would be, have we ever met this client? Do we have any relationship with them whatsoever? Do we know people there? Can we talk to anyone? If that's a 0, I would instantly, you're on the verge of no bid. Second one is, so we don't know anyone there. Let's email the person or try and phone the person who sent the RFP. We'd like to have a conversation with you. What's a good time? Here's my calendar. If they refuse and say no one's allowed a meeting with us, it's part of the process, definitely don't reply to it as an RFP. But send them a nice email saying why. And that you'd love to contact them in 3 months' time when they finish that process because you've done some brilliant research in their sector that they might find quite insightful. That's how I'd respond.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much my view. I mean, my view is, as I said before, unless we've written the RFP, we don't reply.
Do you want to explain, Robert, what you mean by that? Because some of your viewers are going to go, "What do you mean you've written the RFP?
This is your interview, but what I mean by that is that I should be so in bed with the client and have understood what their problems and what their issues are and what their hurts and what their pain points are, that I've told them how to get the benefits that they actually want, so that they end up virtually. So I end up saying, for instance, Robert Craven's FIMO PC tool and Robert Craven's strategy workbook will actually give you all the solutions, so that when they write the RFP goes, we would like the consultant to be using Robert Craven, and you still don't guarantee that you win it, but my point, slightly different but similar, is there's the incumbent, there's the MD's wife's best friend, there's best in class, there's one from 3 years ago. At best, you've got a 1 in 6 chance. Now, I'm not prepared to invest 5 to 10 person days or more on those odds.
Quite right.
Unless there's something that really says to me, this is hot to trot, and you've got something going on. And there are, and the other problem one has, when you start talking about £6 million contracts, is you're competing with people who are willing to invest 50k or 100k winning the work, and they've got a team who are doing sexy videos and building websites just for the response to tender, because you're now competing with Accenture and so on and so forth, who've got endlessly deep pockets compared with you, and where it's like the idea of spending £50,000 preparing to sell to someone is monstrous. I mean, what's the client?
So this is a good opportunity to introduce the kind of the BATNA concept. Very simple concept, So BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The founder of that was a guy called William Ury and also Roger Fisher out of the States, out of Harvard. If your viewers haven't read it, you should read Getting to Yes. Yeah. Brilliant book. A couple of hours read, Robert, probably?
Yeah. What's the one-liner about BATNA?
You could probably tell me. What's the one-liner, Robert?
Well, you can walk away from it is the answer, and recognise what the value is. And also I think there's also a piece about kind of good news, bad news, who knows? I think I'm going to be philosophical for a moment. So good news, bad news, who knows? I mean, actually, winning a £6 million contract, good news, bad news. Well, I'm not going to see the wife for 2 years, blah blah blah.
Correct.
On the other hand, it should, and my view is far more that these things are a bit like buses, and if you miss this bus, there'll be another one coming on later on down the line.
So your one-liner, I think, is absolutely right, which is, and people, I think a lot of, we all do it. We read all sorts of things all day. And people say BATNA. Yeah, I know what BATNA is, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay. And then you go, well, what does it mean? And they go, well, I've just told you. I'm like, no. When you're bidding for something, what does it mean? And they're like, well, I need to have an alternative. I'm like, yeah, you do. And you need to critically, with BATNA, not be wedded to the outcome. A critical thing in any negotiation or bid process, in my view, is The moment, if you're one of 3 suppliers, say you've been shortlisted, the moment you as an agency are wedded to the outcome of winning that piece of work, you are dead in the water. Because your point about, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, I would almost guarantee you it will be a bad thing if you win. Because you've just given me, as a negotiator, huge amounts of power. Because I can spot, I'm reasonably good at spotting, when someone's gone across the threshold of they want it more than I do. If they're a viable supplier and I think they can do the work, and I'm short on my savings target, and I've bought it before, so I know what I'm buying, and I'm being particularly aggressive, back to where we started, those nasty people that, if they do behave like that, the danger is I will negotiate away your margin. And that's a really dangerous place to be. So I think this could be an interesting little topic to discuss, is this about being wedded to the outcome. You have to be able to walk away and go, there'll be another bus. The problem is it's a £6 million bus. There aren't many of them. So what do you do? What are your thoughts, Robert? Because you went, ooh.
Well,
So what are your...
So in my particular story, I picked up the phone and said, by the way, this is a win-win or a win-win for me. And they went, sorry, I don't understand. So I said, well, if we win the work, they said to me, you're blackmailing us. That's the first line. So I said, no, I'm not.
Oh, really?
No, I'm not. You gave us the price, and we've stuck to the price, and you want 33% off. And they said, well, you're blackmailing us. I said, no, it's a win-win. And then they said, how do you see that? So if we win the work, we'll work every hour God made to make this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we lose the work, I get the summer to myself. So I'm absolutely relaxed. And it was like...
And in that moment, just looking at your eyes, I can tell that you mean it. And that's the critical thing. There's a psychology thing happens in the negotiation is, when I'm looking at you either on Zoom or face-to-face, and I'm reasonably good at this, if I spot that it's real, I'm probably going to back off a little bit and really consider what my alternatives are. Have I got a viable alternative that's as good as Robert? Because if I haven't, the power balance is about to shift. And this is the thing in negotiation that I don't think all agency owners get, is that there's a very delicate power balance happens. And when you say something like, it's a win-win or win-win, I have to know you mean it. Because if you don't mean it, and I call your bluff, and you go, well, when I said I could have the summer off, what I actually meant was, I'd quite like to sit at the table still. So could we? And then I'm like, yeah, right, okay. So you actually really do need this work. And that's when you're in a very dangerous position.
So how do you try?
I love these conversations. I think they're great.
How do you translate that to? Because the other thing that you do is negotiating and selling a business. I mean, is it?
Yeah.
Is it the same bear traps? Is it the same rules?
So it's interesting. I've sold 2 businesses, bought 2 businesses, 3 businesses, advised on a number of sales of businesses. What have I learned? So the negotiation, I think there are some very, very common similarities. The first thing is you have to work out at what price is it just over your threshold where you go, that's enough for me. And when someone approaches me with that price, there's some conditions, I'll be prepared to dance. The second thing is, my view, you have to leave at least as much on the table again for the buyer. So if in your mind your business is worth 5 million, and you can justify that for all sorts of reasons, the buyer's got to be able to see how I could turn 5 million into 10 million within about 3 to 5 years. Not an exact path, but you've got to lay enough kind of bird seed for them to go, I can see the trail of how we can make this double the size. Because why would I just buy a business pound for pound if I can't grow it or do something with it? So first thing is, you've got to know your price. Second thing is, you've got to be able to understand they're going to make double, or they're going to double the size of the company. And that has to be okay in your mind. Too many sellers sit there and go, oh, I could have sold it for 7 because it looks like it's doubled in size now. I'm gutted. You must never, ever be gutted. You must be very happy that they've taken it to the next stage and you walked away with £5 million. The other thing I'd say that's really important is you must never frighten the buyer. And what I mean by that is, in a negotiation, as you're going through the process, let's say you've got a letter of intent, some kind of non-legally binding, we're going to buy you, but some kind of, we are serious about going through DD. And you both sign that. If as you start your DD process, all sorts of things come out of the woodwork, you didn't declare something in that were in your accounts. You didn't declare the fact that a client's about to leave you and they're a third of your company. There's all sorts of things that you didn't declare during the early stage of negotiation. The moment that happens, you scare the buyer. Because now if I'm the buyer and I'm buying your business, Robert, I'm like, okay, we just found one thing that's big. What else is in there? If I find one more thing that's concerning that you've not revealed, I'm probably going to walk away. So it might sound counterintuitive, but my view of these things is when you're selling your businesses, be as transparent as you can be commercially at the beginning to ensure that there's no big surprises for the buyer when they walk through DD. And it will make the transaction much smoother.
It kind of sounds like you're a bit a man of several hats. You know, that on the one hand,
I am, yes.
On and even as a buyer, you have several hats. On the one hand, you're saying for both buyer and seller, be reasonable, be open and honest and transparent. That's the best way of communicating. Everyone gets the best. 1 + 1 = 5. Yada yada. And then there's another sort of like person on your shoulder saying, "We can screw them down. We can screw them down. Look, just what's happened there. You know, we can get a better price." And is it possible to hold those two conflicting, contrasting viewpoints of best price and being a good guy?
Good question. So I in fact, I almost exclusively work now for sellers. So I work on the supply side, not on the buy side. So that helps avoid conflicts of interest as a first thing, because otherwise it can get, well, which side are you working on? The second thing is when I'm advising people when they're negotiating with their clients, one of the things that I say is that there's 2 or 3 dynamics going on in the negotiation at any one time. There's the rational bit, which is all the negotiation variables that you're working through. And you're negotiating with whoever the counterparty is. But there's the relationship after the negotiation is complete, assuming you win the deal. And you've got to keep the two in balance. And bad deals, in my view, are where you burn the relationship with the buyer, procurement, the end budget holder, whoever it might be. You win the deal, but you've burnt the relationships. Because that will come back and bite you. You know, it will turn into a bad client, a bad relationship. You'll live with it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so there is a point about, if you feel in the negotiation that it's heading into a very confrontational, very aggressive negotiation, let's say it's procurement and you've got the marketing director sat on the side. If it's heading into that direction, I would pause the negotiation with procurement and say, I'm just going to go and talk to the marketing director. I'm not trying to do anything with you. I'm not trying to change the deal structure, but I want to go and talk to them about what this will feel like after we've negotiated a deal. Procurement will say, you can't do that. If you talk to marketing, the deal's off right now. And my advice would be, back to your win-win-win-win, is, well, if that's the way it's heading, and this adversarial approach is going to continue to the end of the contract negotiation, I'm going to assume that's how it's going to work when I start delivering the work. So actually, we might not be the right agency for you. And if you've got a great relationship with your marketing director, what will happen next is this. Unbeknownst to you, so you pick up your book and you walk out, Procurement go to the marketing director and say, you've got a bit of a problem. So Robert's decided that he's actually not going to bid. And the marketing director's going to go, you did what? So, okay, so you've now decided Robert's firm's not going to bid, right? So Procurement, when you pick the agency that I'm going to work with using my budget and it goes wrong, I'll be banging at your door and we'll go and see the CFO together and we'll see how that goes. So again, the thing that agencies don't realise is that procurement can't push it too far, because if they do, and you really are the right agency, the internal conversation with their stakeholder, who owns the money, remember, the budget sits in marketing, not in procurement, that can become a very tense conversation. And therefore, as an agency, I always say, name the game. If there's a game going on, name the game, put it out on the table, and everyone can look at it.
Love it, love it. Right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to ask you a couple of slightly random questions or
Sure.
from the angle, which require, ideally, a one-sentence answer. So let's see how we can do it.
Okay, I'll try.
So, agency growth, do you think, because you've seen agencies like I have, do you think there are secrets of success? Do you think there are specific things that successful agencies do differently from less successful?
Yes. I think there's three big things in my view. Number one, financial management. They tend to be very, very good at cash flow management specifically. Number two, they've built a sales and marketing engine that goes beyond the founder. And number three, they have a service delivery methodology of some kind that allows them to consistently deliver profitable work.
I love that. Next question. What do you think a fit agency is going to look like in 12 months' time when things have calmed down a bit?
One view I have about what that might look like is probably a slightly more flexible workforce in terms of decide on your core proposition, whatever that might be. So let's say it's, PPC or whatever it is, or influencer marketing, whatever it might be. Work out what the real differentiator is for an agency of your type and ensure that you've got the best quality people you possibly can for that part of the proposition. For the other stuff you have to do, but isn't absolutely at the core, you may want to think about having a more flexible workforce. Could be offshored, remote, could be part-time, whatever it might be. But I think that ability to have an agile kind of workforce operating model, I think will be key.
2 more questions. What next for you, Mike?
I was talking to my wife about this last week, and I love negotiating. I love the negotiation process, the theory. I love helping clients. I love helping organizations get better deals. So I doubt I'll ever stop working, because I'll always be interested in and involved in helping people negotiate better deals. That's what's next, I think.
Okay. And finally, before we say goodbye, as we wrap it up, I'd be fascinated to know what your kind of recommendations, your pearls of wisdom, your golden nuggets, your one-liners that you'd like to share with agency folk. It's always interested to hear what people say.
So I'd say there are 3 things. Let's talk about this kind of negotiation topic, irrespective of who you're negotiating with, procurement, marketing people, whoever. There are probably 3 things. Number 1, emotion's got no place at the negotiating table. Remove your emotion from the negotiation, because it will probably harm you. Number 2, preparation. Negotiations that go well for someone tend to be because they've prepared well, they've thought it through, they've worked it out. And number 3 would be have a little template. So I'm writing this is a plug, I'm writing a negotiation workbook, which has got 4 simple templates in it that you can use for every negotiation that you do. It's in draft form, but it helps people think through what are the goals, what's the process and timings, what are the negotiation variables, what are the issues. And that will help you become a much better negotiator.
Perfect. That is absolutely the perfect place to stop. Links and URLs and all the good stuff is at the bottom. Can I just say, Mike, thank you very much for being a great guest. Having a negotiator was like, it's like, yeah. But it's what's great is the insight from the other side. And what's great is getting a sense of that's why it happens, because their agenda isn't just to screw you down. There is actually an agenda that you can help them, but also some great insight into how to manage ourselves. So thank you very, very much indeed for being a great guest.
Pleasure. I really enjoyed it, Robert. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Fun and enjoyable.